Are you pitching every inning of every game?
Yeah, I pitched 50-some innings that week. The last day, I didn't have anything.
I'm talking with Lorene Ramsey about the 1965 Amateur Softball Association National Championship Tournament. Late summer, Stratford, Connecticut, featuring the best of the best, the most elite fast-pitch teams among hundreds of thousands that competed across North America. The tournament was double elimination. You weren't knocked out until you lost twice, which was convenient for Lori's team, the Pekin-Letts, who stumbled early.
We played Canada the first game, and we won it 1-0 in 15 innings. Then we played Fresno. They had a really good team, too, and we got beat 3-2, I think it was, or 2-1, which put us down in the losers bracket, or as they call it, the consolation bracket. You can still win the nationals, though.
Don't worry, Lori and the Pekin-Letts soon got rolling. But before we talk about what happened next, some context. These days, the NCAA Women's College World Series feels like the apex of fast-pitch softball, which means your career hits its apex while you're still in college. Not back then. Lori Ramsey was 29 in 1965. She'd spent all of her 20s, her athletic prime, training and competing like a world-class athlete. College players are typically done at age 22. Lori played high-level fast-pitch softball for 22 seasons. And that matters. Here's Linda Lynch, an institution of New Jersey softball as a player, coach, and umpire.
For people that played into their 40s, you know that you really don't start to get it polished into a gem until the 30s. Not knocking the 22-year-olds and top players in the country, but with time and seasoning, you get better and better and better.
That was the ASA in the mid-60s. Hundreds of thousands of teams, seasoned players, big crowds. One year, Lori's team, the Pekin-Letts from Central Illinois, drew 120,000 people to its home games, better than Major League Baseball's Cleveland Indians on a per-game basis. Lori was a superstar pitcher, a first-team All-American in 1965, and eventually a Hall of Famer. For decades in the middle of the last century, ASA softball provided an extraordinary forum for elite women athletes, one that changed the landscape of women's sports in America. And that's our focus today. This season on Uningrained, we're investigating the ingrained cultural idea that softball is baseball for girls, including where that idea came from. Part of the answer from episode 1 is that baseball said no to women. In episode 2, we saw that women's sports leaders didn't go to bat for baseball when they had the chance. Today, we look at how softball grew into a viable alternative to baseball, which means venturing to a forgotten, extraordinary world where for several decades, adult women's fast-pitch softball absolutely thrived. This is Uningrained. I'm Steve Hendershot. Uningrained is a show about blind spots, invisible ideas, and hidden assumptions, about identifying them, evaluating them, and when it makes sense, addressing them. This season, baseball is the national pastime, central to America's culture and identity. So when we say that softball is baseball for girls, are we boxing women out of an essential piece of American life? Come along and decide for yourself. And please, subscribe, check out all of the bonus Uningrained content on Substack, and tell your friends. Thank you. This show only works with your help. The Pekin-Letts leaned hard on their star pitcher Lori Ramsey during the week of that 1965 ASA National Championship Tournament. As in, when the Pekin-Letts took the field, it was pretty much Lori on the mound. Pitching, of course, is one of the key differences between fast-pitch softball and baseball. Softball is underhand, baseball is overhand. You can still fire a softball in there at 70 miles an hour, which plays like 95 given the smaller field dimensions, but it doesn't tax your arm in the same way.
It's just so much easier on your arm to throw underhand than it is overhand. Overhand is not a natural motion. Underhand, that's how you've walked your whole life, with your arm swinging that way.
Which means a dominant softball pitcher like Lori is an incredible weapon. An ace pitcher is valuable to a baseball team too, but only so much. After all, they're only out there once every few days. But during this golden age of softball, teams were defined by their star pitchers, both because those pitchers were always out there and also because they were so effective. The Major League Baseball record for no-hitters is 7. Compare that to the top mid-century pitcher in women's softball, Bertha Reagan-Ticky. She threw 162 no-hitters. Lori Ramsey reeled off a streak of more than 98 consecutive scoreless innings earlier in that 1965 season, So when the Pekinlets made a run at the national championship, they just handed her the ball, including their dramatic climb up from the consolation bracket.
We beat Salt Lake City 2-1. Then Portland Florists that year were the defending champs, and we beat them 4-1 and eliminated them. And after we beat Portland, we had to play Hartford, Connecticut, and we beat them 5-0. And then that night we beat Nashville, Tennessee, and the gal that pitched for them, she was 49 years old, and we got 4 runs off of her. She wasn't too tough at 49. And they had Nera White, who could run like the winds, and she was a great basketball player, but she didn't hit.
That Nashville team Lori mentioned, the pitcher was Lottie Jackson, famed for her work with the Jacksmaids, a legendary New Orleans team that won 5 ASA titles in the 1940s. And Nera White, who couldn't hit, a member of the Basketball Hall of Fame. The Pekinlets advanced to the last day of the tournament, where they're one of 3 teams still standing. They're also testing the limits of that durability we talked about a minute ago. Lori is pitching every inning of every game, multiple games a day, and starting to feel it.
There was no place to eat hardly when we finished that night. And then we're playing at noon the next day against Ray Bestis.
The Ray Bestis Breakettes, the host team and the dominant force in the ASA women's fast-pitch softball universe from the late 50s on. Lots of these ASA teams were sponsored by manufacturers. Lori's team was originally known as the Caterpillar Dieselettes, for example, before moving to Pekin. The Breakettes reigned supreme in those days. The team with the most dominant pitcher often did. The Breakettes had Bertha Reagan Tickey, she of the 162 no-hitters. It's Lori and the Pekinlets versus Bertha and the Breakettes for a chance to advance to the final and face another star pitcher, Joan Joyce of the Orange Lionettes from Southern California. And the Pekinlets finally run out of gas.
They beat us, I think it was 4 or 5-0. I had nothing, and my team didn't have very much either.
The Lionettes win the championship. Bertha Reagan Tickey, by then in her 40s, no longer has every inning of every game longevity and doesn't pitch in the finale. Joan Joyce outduels another Hall of Famer, Donna Lopiano, to win the last game. There was always next year, and in the ASA, top women players had dozens of next years, which is remarkable. In 1965, school-based athletics opportunities were still scarce for girls across the country. Competitive team sports opportunities, even more so. Yet by this point, the ASA fast-pitch softball scene had been rocking for decades. It somehow managed to navigate all of the weird terrain we covered in the first couple of episodes. It wasn't baseball or football, so the sports establishment wasn't especially bothered that women played the game. And even though it was extremely competitive and almost professional, there was no pushback from the physical education establishment, probably because ASA competition wasn't school-sponsored. So how exactly did softball carve out this unique space? That's a story that involves a frolic at the Farragut Boat Club in Chicago and an apparently flipped choice by an enterprising sports writer. Hi, quick break to plug Uningrained on Substack. You've already found our main show, and Substack is where we go deeper. Deeper with extended play interviews that relate to each season's topic, and deeper in terms of Uningrained's broader focus on identifying and assessing blind spots, invisible ideas, and hidden assumptions, including how to address those issues in our lives and careers. Join our Substack community at uningrained.substack.com. Thanks, and back to our story. In 1891, just a couple of years after the invention of softball, its creators published a 20-page guide to the sport that includes an origin story. Let's just read it. It's a great excuse to use my old-timey guy voice again.
The game of indoor baseball was invented in Chicago in 1887 and came about through a frolic among the members of the Farragut Club, who, in a spirit of fun on Thanksgiving Day of that year, threw an ordinary boxing glove around the hall, which was struck at by one of the boys with a broom. Some 20 members had assembled as usual on holidays, and George W. Hancock, seeing the possibility of a new sport, said in a bantering way, "Say, boys, let's play baseball." And the wrestling mat was hauled around cornerwise and a broom obtained. One of the boxing gloves was used for a ball, and with the boys in position, they commenced their sport without rule or wisdom, but there was great fun.
Indoor baseball takes off in Chicago and quickly spreads elsewhere. In 1895, firefighters in Minneapolis move the game outdoors and call it kitten ball. By 1897, George Hancock is no longer self-publishing his guide. It's now under the banner of the Spalding Athletic Library, an imprint of A.G. Spalding & Brothers, the Chicago-based sporting goods company whose name should sound familiar from this season's first episode. Spalding, the company, by 1897, is making balls, bats, and bases, specifically for indoor baseball. By 1903, the Spalding Guide grows to contain two very interesting items for our story, both written by Chicago high school instructors and aimed, it seems, at their peers across the country. First, there's a 4-page essay called Indoor Baseball for Women, followed by a 3-page piece called How to Teach Girls to Play Indoor Baseball. Our last episode focused on the physical education movement whose influence was expanding within American schools during this era, and which embraced exercise but was far warier of competition, especially for women. The instructional article starts by making a case that games are worthy to be included in a PE curriculum alongside straight-up exercise. It ends with this chestnut.
When you see the girls returning to their rooms with sparkling eyes and flushed cheeks, full of new life, full of mirth, full of healthy excitement, when you see those beautiful roses in their cheeks, you must feel that you've been sufficiently rewarded for your hard work.
So indoor baseball caters to the women's market, specifically trying to get women's physical education leaders to embrace the game. Contrast that with Spalding's baseball guides from that period, which don't cater to women. Okay, fast forward a couple of decades, during which softball gets its name and gets really popular across the country as a community sport. Now it's the Great Depression, and the city of Chicago is looking for a way to recapture its stalled momentum. Only a few months after the downfall of gangster Al Capone, Chicago announces plans to celebrate its 1933 centennial by hosting a World's Fair. A local paper, the Chicago American, approaches the fair organizers about including a softball tournament, showing off this local invention that was making waves nationally. And the organizers decide to invite women's teams. They didn't set out to make a radical choice. It reminds me more of the spontaneous way the guy in charge of the Ypsilanti Little League decided to let Carolyn King try out on the last episode. Here's Leo Fisher, one of the organizers of the World's Fair tournament. And by here's Leo Fisher, I mean we are really giving old-time voice a workout today.
We decided to include one for girls' teams as well. We didn't think it would go very well, but we didn't want to slight the ladies. They could have their chance if they wanted it. It developed that they wanted it.
Now, Leo did know there was some talent in the women's bracket. Track meets in those days included an event called the baseball throw, and in 1931, a young woman named Nan Jindal set a record during a meet at Soldier Field in Chicago. Leo and the Chicago American then supported her successful bid to make the 1932 Olympic team throwing the javelin. At the World's Fair tournament, Nan starred for the winning softball team, Great Northern Laundry. 350,000 people watched softball. And out of the fair came the Amateur Softball Association, co-founded by Leo, which started coordinating competitive play across the country, promoting the sport, and hosting national championships. Softball, which up to that point not only has a bunch of different names, but also different rules, different field dimensions, different pitching styles, different ball sizes, softball then gets standardized. Fast pitch emerges. Teams spring up across the country, for men and women. In fact, for a long time it's men's fast pitch that's higher profile, thanks to star players like Harold Shifty Gears. The teams were sponsored by florists, breweries, car dealers, funeral homes, or by communities, or they were just the grassroots creations of regular people with softball fever. In 1934, for example, a 17-year-old girl named Toots started a team in New Jersey in the middle of the Great Depression. Decades later, Linda Lynch played for the team.
Their first year, there's a photo of the team where they're all wearing their street clothes and they just have the letter A pinned to their shirts. That was the uniform. The only people that used the glove were the catcher and the first baseman.
It's baseball, of course, that dominates the American cultural imagination in this era. And as the fast pitch scene is getting off the ground, some women give baseball a go. Margaret Gisolo stars as a 14-year-old for a championship American Legion baseball team in 1928, earning the nickname Girl Babe Ruth. In response to her success, the American Legion bans girls from play for half a century. Jackie Mitchell is a pitcher for the Chattanooga Lookouts who strikes out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig during an exhibition against the Yankees in 1931. Her prize? People speculated about whether the Babe swung and missed on purpose. But Mitchell went on to pitch many seasons for minor league teams as well as two famed barnstorming teams, the House of David and Buckleye's Hawaiians. Women's baseball historian John Kovach found 26 box scores where Mitchell pitched for the Hawaiians, and she never gave up a run. On the House of David, she pitched an inning against the St. Louis Cardinals and retired the side in order. But through another lens, Mitchell's whole career plays a bit like a publicity stunt. Granted, a very effective publicity stunt. Here's John, who wrote a book about Jackie.
This is a point in time where the Piedmont League is struggling financially, as are a lot of minor leagues. And they were drawing groups of fans like 25 or 50 to a ball game. Well, the league hired her to pitch for all the teams in the league. So one day she might be with Team A, and the next day Team A and B still may be playing each other, but she is now pitching for Team B against Team A. And now all of a sudden they're drawing 750, 1,200. The president of the league several years after said the only reason that our league survived was because of the appearances of Jackie Mitchell.
A woman who stars in baseball is at best a curiosity, a novelty. Or at worst, something so dangerous she has to be legislated out of the game. Compare that to softball, where a great woman player can just be good, with no fuss beyond what she merits with her play. By about 1950, when Lori Ramsey starts playing, there are so many softball options near St. Louis that her family has choices. And instead of joining a youth team, Lori signs on as a 14-year-old on a team otherwise comprised of adult women. She didn't have to wait long for opportunity to knock.
On the way home after the second game, my dad said, "What do you think about the pitcher on your team?" I said, "I'm better than she is." And he said, "Well, I don't think you're going to get a chance." I said, "I don't either." So this team that had won it got 3 runs off her in the first inning, and she said she was sick. And she left, went home. And so our second pitcher was Pat Richmond. She played left field for us very well, I might add. And Marion, who was the coach, told her to warm up. She said, "I can't warm up in 5 minutes between innings to pitch." And Marion said, "Well, we need you out there." She said, "I'm not going." So she looked at me and she said, "Can you warm up in 5 minutes?" And I had never pitched in a game. I said, "Yes, I can." I wanted my butt off that bench. And I got out there and I shut them out for the last 6 innings. And so we're going home, and my parents said, "Well, now you'll get to pitch maybe." I said, "No, she's going to pitch Pat Richmond." So she got Pat Richmond when she came in, and she said, "I'm going to pitch you tonight." And Pat said, "No, I'm not pitching. I don't like to pitch." She said, "I'm a good outfielder." And so she looked at me and she said, "Well, I guess we'll have to go with you tonight." So I shut the team out that we played, and we won. So she starts me the next game, and I shut them out, and I went 67 innings before anybody scored. And we didn't have any more foolish comments.
A few years later, after a stint playing on a team sponsored by a funeral home,
They called us the Lady Digger Odells.
Lori eventually ascends to the powerhouse team in the area, the Caterpillar Dieselettes in Peoria, Illinois. Now remember that softball is PE movement adjacent, and PE is very strict about amateurism. So ASA softball was very strict about amateurism too, which got thorny because of all these factory teams that employed their players, not as ball players, not technically, but the line between professional and amateur was pretty thin. Lori's experience at Caterpillar offers a little peek into how that worked.
I made 60 cents an hour in the ice cream stand that I worked that was similar to Dairy Queen in those days. And Caterpillar was going to pay me 56 something a week. And so I came up and got started with them. It was a real job. I had to do it. And we didn't know this at the time, but one of our players found out that they had someone watch us where we worked to make sure that we were doing our job, and everybody was doing their job. We had a perfectly manicured diamond at Caterpillar, and we had a practice diamond. We had everything. We'd get into the locker room, and you just drop your uniform there, and it'd be clean and hanging there the next day. The major league players were getting $10 a day to eat on. We got $8. And when we were on the road, we got our salary, even though we were representing Caterpillar. And so they didn't classify us as professionals. So I saved a lot of money for college that summer.
So the amateurism thing, it was a constant negotiation. And somehow ASA softball also managed to avoid the PE critique that it was too competitive. They weren't school teams, that helped. But also more and more women working in PE were playing and loving softball, and that helped too. Lori herself is a great example. She has multiple degrees in physical education and eventually became a Hall of Fame college softball coach and basketball coach. On the Mount Rushmore of college softball coaches, people like Patty Gasso, Carol Hutchins, and Margie Wright all have PE degrees. The ASA benefits from decades of steady growth and popularity. Amidst a broader culture that mostly remained opposed or indifferent to high-level women's sports, the mid-century ASA softball scene was Shangri-La, a competitive sports paradise. But trouble was brewing. Hey, it's Steve. I want to tell you about the other Uningrained podcast, Uningrained Extended Play. Extended Play offers extended versions of the interviews you hear on Uningrained. Each episode is still edited, still about half an hour, but these are conversations with one guest. To listen, subscribe to Uningrained on Substack at uningrained.substack.com. Then listen on the Substack app or grab the link and listen in your favorite podcast player. Thanks, and back to the story. What could disrupt the wonderful world of ASA women's fast-pitch softball in the middle of the 20th century? The first challenge may sound familiar to college sports fans. As the sport benefited from bigger crowds and more sponsorship money, that success started to butt up against the ASA's hardline commitments to amateurism. Some players who didn't necessarily want to go pro at least wanted not to lose money traveling to tournaments. Meanwhile, sports entrepreneurs saw an opportunity to create some competition. Professional women's leagues started to pop up, as well as leagues that were amateur but less hardline about the rules of amateurism. These leagues drew from the well of talent developed within the ASA. Lori Ramsey, for example, got recruited by one such league while she was still an under-the-radar youth softball player near St. Louis.
And the baseball league, when I was in high school, I got a letter from Kalamazoo, I think, about the tryouts and all this. And I showed it to my dad, and I said, "Look at this." And my dad, there was a waste can there. He took it and threw it in the waste can. He said, "You're not going anywhere till you graduate from high school."
That's right. Young softball star Lori got recruited by the League of Their Own baseball league. It was a wild era with several challengers to the ASA's hold on top women ball players. One was a rival amateur federation called the National Softball Congress that was a little more flexible in terms of letting you earn enough to defray your tournament expenses. The New Orleans Jacks switched over to that one, taking stars like Nina Corrigan, Lottie Jackson, and Frida Savona. Then you had the National Girls Softball League, a pro league based in Chicago and founded in 1944, which soon changed its name to the National Girls Baseball League, despite continuing to play softball. Frida Savona and her sister Olympia soon jumped to that league. But why would it even remotely make sense for a softball league to put baseball in its name? Because of the third league in play here, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, started in Chicago in 1943 as the All-American Girls Professional Softball League. This is the league featured in A League of Their Own. It, too, changed names a bunch of times, sometimes using baseball, sometimes softball, sometimes just ball. And for good reason. It was a hybrid game. There were some baseball elements included right away, but during the first seasons, the pitching was underhanded, the ball was bigger than a baseball, and lots of players came from fast-pitch softball. In fact, if you came in as a baseball player, you were at a disadvantage.
It was really a difficult transition that first year because they were still playing with that 10-inch ball, and I didn't know that I was playing with it. And so I had really bad control that first year.
That's Janine Lesko-DeCombs, who pitched for the Grand Rapids Chicks. In this story of the All-American League, the one from the movie, it's murkier than you expected, right? This league was truly a crescendo, a climactic moment for women's baseball. It grew into that. But you can't really see it in strict opposition to softball because it doesn't happen without ASA softball. And for years, it has these hybrid elements. Only slowly did the league transition to full-on baseball, to the relief of its baseball players.
The second year, when they went to the regulation baseball, I was right in there. I pitched, it was really good. And so I got to be a starting pitcher.
All the while, ASA softball players remained prime targets. The ASA fought back by threatening long suspensions for anyone who defected, not because they were choosing baseball over softball, but because they were choosing professionalism over amateurism. As for what was going on with the strange hybrid world of the All-American League, they needed polished ball players, which meant they needed ASA softball players. But selling tickets to a crowd beyond the ASA faithful meant they wanted baseball, because of its familiarity, its legacy, all the Americana. So they tried to walk the line. As they did so, lots of women playing in that league discovered or reaffirmed that they loved baseball. The genesis of this league is complicated, but eventually this does become the one brief historical moment when the opportunity for women to play baseball existed without tons of accompanying baggage. Sure, plenty of softball diehards weren't interested, but people like Janine jumped at it, as did many women playing ASA softball. Mary Moore, for example, pitched for the Wyandotte Chemicals ASA softball team, but joined the All-American League once it was fully baseball. For Mary, the baseball league wasn't just a chance to turn pro, it was a chance to play the sport she loved first and most.
When I was growing up, I was playing ball out in the field with the boys. I mean, wasn't playing that much softball, and I had small hands too, and actually the baseball was easier to throw than the large softball. And I just liked it better. So, more flexibility. You could lead off, you could bunt, and stuff like that. And softball, you couldn't do any of that. So that's why I liked the baseball.
Mary's connection to baseball runs even deeper than that. She didn't grow up at the ballpark like Carrie Schuler, but she had the next best thing. A Detroit Tiger star lived nearby and would play ball with the neighborhood kids.
There was a Detroit player that lived about 3 blocks from where I lived, and one of my high school chums would babysit for him. And of course, I'd go over and help her so that, I got to know Eddie Lake. And he used to take us to the ballpark with him for ball games with the Detroit Tigers. And on his day off, he would come out and hit balls to us kids. And of course, most kids, when you see them, when they hit a fly ball, they run in like mad. And of course, the ball is way over their head. And so I learned to judge fly balls and, a little bit about baseball. And so that really helped.
Mary joined the Springfield Sallies in 1950 and crushed it.
My first year, I led my team in almost every category: hits, runs scored, home runs, stolen bases, you name it.
But life as a pro baseball player wasn't actually so different from life as an ASA softball star. Specifically, it wasn't so cushy that Mary didn't need a second job in the off-season. She worked at a factory making car parts and suffered a gruesome accident.
I was working a punch press, and the press repeated, and the guard only halfway worked, jerked my hand back, took off part of that one finger, twisted the other and cut off the tip of that one, split the other one open and injured the other one. And so I went to spring training in 51, but they wouldn't keep me.
Somehow Mary was back on the field with the Battle Creek Bells by the end of that summer and played another year after that, but her power was gone. Not surprising, considering how she struggled post-injury to grip the bat. Mary saw the writing on the wall and tried to go back to softball, but ran into another foreboding opponent, the ASA's severe penalties for athletes trying to regain amateur status. Fortunately, she still had friends in softball.
Some of my softball teams and managers went to bat for me to get me reinstated early because of my injury, because you're supposed to sit out 5 years if you're a professional and go back to amateur. But they got me reinstated in 2 years. So I went back and, of course, played softball for quite a few years. We took a state Class A championship, a Class B and a Class C, and I played, until I got too old and too slow to play fast pitch. I went to slow pitch and played that for years and years and years and years. I quit at age 78 and thought, well, maybe I should quit before I get out there and kill myself.
Thanks to a league of their own, lots of people are more aware of the All-American League today than the heyday of ASA softball. But at the time, the top ASA teams like Lorie's Pekin-Letts were bigger draws, and ultimately the ASA withstood the challenges posed by all these other leagues. But rival leagues weren't the only issue, not by a long shot, and the ASA's glory days didn't last forever. In fact, that 1965 tournament happened during this era's twilight. What else was going on that ended the golden age? A few things. First, big companies were gradually pulling back from sponsoring teams. Then, men's fast pitch, which had really tag-teamed with the women's game to drive softball's rise, was declining. And TV sports was getting bigger and winning the attention of people who in the previous era opted to go watch local or regional teams play in person. And here's the cruelest twist. In the early 70s, as colleges began to embrace softball, the scholarship became a powerful incentive. Soon the main event in women's fast-pitch softball was the Women's College World Series. That event ascended, and without the best 18 to 22-year-olds, the ASA's national tournament declined. The ASA's golden age ultimately was a glorious thing built on an unsteady foundation. And how's this for a bonkers, apt, true story of a metaphor? We started this episode at the Rebestos Breakettes softball stadium in Stratford, Connecticut, site of the 1965 ASA tournament. Rebestos, synonymous with excellence in women's softball. Rebestos, synonymous with car parts manufactured using asbestos. Eventually, a nasty secret seeps out into view. For years, Rebestos' parent company dumped toxic waste beneath the bleachers of its famous softball field. What should be hallowed ground for softball instead has been fenced off, literally, until the site was cleared for redevelopment just this month, June 2026. It's coincidence that most adult women fast-pitch players have been fenced off from elite competitive opportunities for the last 50 years, and now that too may be changing with the rise of the Professional Athletes Unlimited Softball League, or AUSL. We'll get to that later. But today's story is about the golden age, not just for softball, but for all of women's sports. So we're going to end with a golden moment.
We were always front page. It was a Daily Times, and we had the Pekin sports writer. He took pictures of us playing, and he covered every game. He said, Pekin's a sports town. Now we have a nationally ranked women's softball team, and I'm going to push it every way I can. And he did. We drew 120,000 one summer.
Pekin, Illinois, a town of about 30,000 in the early 1960s, drew crowds of 10,000 to watch its elite women's softball team compete, including when it hosted the Japanese national team in 1962. The factory team era was already receding. Gone was the Caterpillar sponsorship. But the team was great, and the town was behind the team, and life was good for Lorie and her teammates. The Pekin-Letts cherish those memories.
We still get together with the Pekin-Letts, and we laugh once a month. We laugh about all the things that used to happen, and we never lose a game when we get together.
This episode of Uningrained was reported and produced by me, Steve Hendershot. Thanks to Sue Freeberg from the Washington, Illinois Historical Society, who introduced me to Lori Ramsey, and to Amy Crosby from the AAGPBL Players Association, that's the All-American League, for coordinating my conversation with Mary Moore and Janine Lesko-DeCombs. Thanks as always to Nathan McDonald for his help with all things Uningrained, and, as always, in this case especially, lots of research informed this episode, and a list of those sources will land on our Substack soon. That's uningrained.substack.com, along with a separate podcast called Uningrained Extended Play that features longer, more conversational versions of some of our interviews. Your help in sharing and promoting this show is very much appreciated, so thank you. Please keep it up. Uningrained is a production of Cedar Cathedral Narrative Studio.